Ezras Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Kiddushin Daf Nun Zayin, and we're going to begin on the Daf Nun Zayin Omer Aleph. I'm just going to review what the Mishnah said. Let me make it bigger on the screen. The Mishnah has said that if a man goes over to a woman and gives her something for Kiddushin, and that something that he gives her is Asr Bahanoah, so then the woman is not. She didn't receive anything because it's something that you're not allowed to benefit from. What's an example of something that you're not allowed to benefit from? So the Mishnah gives you examples. Let's say you give the woman a piece of arla. You give an apple from a tree that's not less than 3 years old. You pick an apple off a tree, it's a tiny apple, and you give it to her. Well, it's arla, so then you're not really giving her anything. So that's what the Mishnah gives you examples. The Mishnah gives you a couple of more examples. We'll start with the examples that we're going to be discussing today. Let's say Egla Arufa. Remember what the Egla Arufa was? That was when we don't know who murdered somebody in a city. So the people of the city would bring a calf right by a very hard piece of valley area, and they would chop its head off. Basically, that's called Arufa. And that will say to Hashem, listen, we don't know who the murderer is. Please forgive the whole city. So that if someone takes a piece of that egla, of that dead calf, and gives it to a woman, so then she's not mukudeshes. Then we will discuss tzipore mitzoira. Tzipore mitzoira is the birds of a mitzora. What is that? If we know, we're going to just read the Chumash so that the Chumash says like this. When a mitzora becomes healed, right? A mitzora is somebody who's outside the city because he spoke Lashon Hara. Let's say he gets healed from his nega. So the kohen comes out and sees that he's healed. There's no nega anymore. No. So then the kohen says, and this is very important, the kohen commands that you take for the one who wants to become pure, you take him two birds, a piece of cedar wood and a crimson red string, and azov, a piece of grass. And what they do is they take one of those birds and they shech the bird, and they put its blood into a keli, an earthenware keli that has mayim chayim, that has spring water in it. Okay, so now you have the blood and the blood and the water in the keli, and then they take the live bird and dunk it into that blood together with the eitz eresh, nitilas, azov. And then what do? They sprinkle it onto the mitzora 7 times, and now he can go into the camp. Now he can come back in to be a regular Jew. And what do they do with the bird that that was not slaughtered? They let it go free on the field. That's what the Gemara. That's what the Chumash says. So if someone would take the bird that you slaughtered, the slaughtering bird, and you give that to a lady and you say, Hareyat Mukudeshes Li, that lady is not Mukudeshes. Why? Because that slaughtered bird is Asr Bahana. That's another example of Asr Bahana. Then the Mishnah gives you another example, and then we'll go into the Gemara. Ubasar B'chalav. Let's do that example. Basar B'chalav means if, let's say, a person's eating a cheeseburger, right, and he gives it to a lady and says, Hareyat Mukudeshes Li. Well, we know Basar B'chalav, meat cooked in milk, is Asr Bahana. So therefore, Einu Mekudesha, she's not betrothed. Okay, let's go into the Gemara. And the Gemara is just going to want to know, how do you know all these things mentioned in the Mishnah are items that are Asr Bahana? So we're starting from Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, approximately 8 lines from the top, and the Gemara begins, Be'egla Arufa, the calf that you chopped its head off, right? So how do you know that calf is Asr Bahana? Answers the Gemara, Manolan, Omar Debei Rabbi Yanai. So Debei Rabbi Yanai taught us, it says kapara, that this Egla Arufa is bringing forgiveness for the city. So the Torah calls it, you're sort of bringing a kapara for the city. So kisiba kikachim, should we treat it like a regular carbon, which is a carbon that belongs to the Eibush that you're not allowed to benefit from. So therefore, Mekadesh Be'egla Arufa, it's not Mukudeshes. Tzipore Mitzora, the birds of a mitzora. We explained what that is. The slaughtered bird of a mitzora. How do you know? Min nalan. How do you know the slaughtered of the 2 birds? That is Asr Bahana. The Tana Bei Rabbi Shmuel taught us. Nema machshir u'mechape b'bifnim. the Torah tells us about two types of carbonas that you bring in the Beis Hamikdash. One type of carbon is called a machshir, which allows you to eat kachim, let's say the asham mitzoira. It's a carbon type, it's a machshir, it permits you to do something. And then there's, of course, any other carbon, like a carbon chatas that brings about kapara. The Nemar and the Torah also talks about two types of procedures, let's say, that are brought not in the Beis Hamikdash, that are brought outside the Beis Hamikdash. Machshir u'mechapim b'chutz. Things that bring forgiveness and things that prepare a person to do something. For example, tzipari mitzoira, prepare a person to go back into the regular city. U'mechaper, or the egla rufa, for example, is a procedure done outside the Beis Hamikdash. Those are two things that the Torah discusses, ideas of procedures that are done outside the Beis Hamikdash. So we make a comparison. Just like every carbon brought in the Beis Hamikdash are all similar, whether they're a machshir type of carbon or a forgiveness type of carbon. Also, things that are done outside the Beis Hamikdash, machshir, some things that, like the birds of the Metzora, which allow a person to go into the city, the Metzora to move back into the city, u'mechaper, and the egla rufa, ha'amor b'chutz, which are done outside the Beis Hamikdash, they're similar. Also, machshir k'mechaper. We make the machshir has a din like the mechaper. So what basically we're saying is that the birds of the Metzora are like the egla rufa. Now, we just established before that egla rufa is aser bahana. So therefore, the birds of a Metzora, this geshachten bird of a Metzora, is also aser bahana. So now the Gemara brings a machlekes. Okay, the geshachten bird, when does it become aser bahana? Itmar sipar Metzora me'ei masai asurum. From when do they become aser? So Rabbi Yochanan Amar mishash chita. When you shech the one of the birds, that bird becomes aser. Rav Shlakish says no, mishas lakicha, when you purchase it. Now, when you purchase it, you don't know which bird you're going to shech. But after you shech that bird, the other bird that you're not going to slaughter, automatically now his isser becomes mutter. In other words, Rav Shlakish holds that from the purchase time, both birds become asr. And when you decide which one you're going to slaughter, then the other one, the slaughtered one, remains asr. The other one now becomes permitted. But Rabbi Yochanan said, no, none of them are asr up until the time of shechita. So Rabbi Yochanan says that from the time of slaughtering, that's when they become asr. Shechita hu da asr la, because what makes these birds asr is the act of slaughtering. The slaughtering procedure makes this an isser type of thing that makes it become asr ba'na. When you purchase it, because how do you know the birds of a Metzora are asr b'hana? Because you learn it from egla rufa. So ma egla rufa, the egla rufa b'chayim, even before you chop the head off of the egla rufa, it's asr b'hana. So also the birds of the Metzora, the bird of the Metzora mechayim, already asr b'hana at the time that you're purchasing it. When you're purchasing on the behalf of the Metzora, as soon as you buy it, asr b'hana. The egla arufa mgufa me'emasai. From exactly when does the egla arufa become asr? You're telling me it's before you chop the head off. So when does it become asr? When you purchase it? I knew around what time. I don't know exactly when the egla arufa becomes asr. I used to know. I forgot it. But my friends theorized and said, when does the egla arufa become asa? Yuridasa l'nachal esen hu aisarta. When you lead the egla arufa down into the valley to do the procedure of knocking its head, as you're leading it down to the valley, that's when it becomes asa. Oh, so then wait a second. So not when you purchase the calf, but actually when you start leading the animal down to the Nachal Esam, to the valley, where the Torah describes where you do the chopping the head off. So then if Tzipar B'Tzara should also not be Asr. So the Gemara says, Ima Egla Rufa Mishas Lekicha Loy Mitasra. You told me that Egla Rufa is not Asr from when you purchase it. So Tzipar B'Tzara have to be the same. Af Tzipar B'Tzara Nami Mishas Lekicha Loy Mitasre. So also the birds of the Metzora should not be Asr from the time that you purchase it. So why does Rish Lakish say, no, by the birds of the Metzora, they are Asr from the time that you purchase it? If you're comparing it to Egla Rufa, there should be another time period that it becomes Aser. So the Gemara says, Hachi Hashta, how can you come up with this question? Hasam by the Egla Rufa Isle Gvul Achrina. There's another boundary. There's a purchase, and then there's a procedure walking the animal down to the Nachal Eson. So I'll say that it becomes also when you start walking the animal down to the Nachal Eson, not when you purchase it. Hacha, but by the birth of the Mitzorah, there's only one time period. Is there another time period that you could say it should become aser? The only time period when mechayim, when it's alive, that it becomes aser, must be when you purchase it. So again, Rabbi Yochanan holds that the birds are not aser when you purchase it; they're aser when you shecht it. Rish Lakish holds that no, even when you purchase those birds become aser bahana. Esvei Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan asked Rish Lakish. The pasuk says, "Kol tzipor tahara techelu." The Torah tells us what's kosher. The Torah says any tahar bird you can eat. Any what's kol l'rabas shulachas. Any kosher bird, even the bird that was sent away by the Mitzorah, the bird that you sent it away that you did not slaughter. If somebody finds that bird, they can eat it. And the following, the pasuk says, these you cannot eat from the kosher birds, from the birds. Asher, these, what's l'rabais es hashchuta, that tells you the slaughtered bird of the Mitzorah cannot be eaten. So here's a brisa that says clearly that only when does it become asur b'hana? When you slaughter it. Because v'isal tekaycha mechayim asura, if you're already telling me that if you think to say that already when you purchase it while it's still alive, it's asur b'hana. Why did we need a pasuk to tell you that it stays asur after you slaughter it? It was already asur to have benefit from this when you already purchased it. So how does Rish Lakish square off this brisa? So the Gemara says that Mahu Desema, Rish Lakish will tell you that the brisa is teaching you a big novelty. I would have thought midi dehava kotchim. It should be like any kotchim, like kotchim kalim, like a korban shlomim. The mechayim asir, when it's a live animal, it becomes asar. V'asr shchito machshirla, but once you slaughter it, it becomes kosher. So I would think that the bird of the Mitzorah, while it's alive, it's asar bahana. After you slaughter it, I would think it's permitted. Kamash Malan, no, that it remains asar, and the isser never leaves. The only isser leaves is from the live bird. Eisvei, so the Gemara asks another question against Rish Lakish. Shchakta v'nitzis treifa. You have the pair of birds, and you shechted one of them, and it turned out to be a non-kosher shchita. We found out that, let's say, there's a hole in the lung or something like that, or the hole in the windpipe. So therefore, it wasn't such a good shchita. Yikach zug l'shniya. So the live bird, you take another pair. You don't have to buy a new set. You just take and replace it and do another shchita for the remaining live bird. Very shayna. But the bird that you actually slaughtered, mutaris bahana, it's mutar bahana. You're allowed to benefit from it. Even though it's a treifa, you'll sell it to a guy. Wait a second, but you told me, Rish Lakish, that when you purchase these birds, they become asar bahana. So how did the isser come? Where did the isser go away? If you tell me that already when it's still alive, it was asar, so then why do you tell me that if you find that it's a treifa, it's mutar bahana? Once you purchase it, it remains asar bahana. Where did it become mutar bahana? Amalei. So Rish Lakish will answer, here we're talking about the treifa wasn't a brand new treifa. It was a treifa inside the stomach, inside the intestines. So from the time that you purchase it, it didn't even have kedusha. It didn't have anything on it. It wasn't a kosher bird to be slaughtered on behalf of the Mitzorah. The loy chal alei kedusha klal. It didn't have any holiness on it. So therefore, it never became asur because the purchase probably was a mistake. You thought you were buying a healthy bird, and it turned out you bought a non-healthy bird, so it never had even the kedusha on it to permit the Mitzorah to be used as a slaughtered bird, and therefore it never became asur bahana. Eisvei, another one last question against Rish Lakish. Shachta shloi be'ezov v'shloi be'etz erev v'shloi be'tnit halas. You slaughtered the bird. Now remember, you're supposed to take the live bird with this grass, the hyssop, or with a piece of cedar wood and a red crimson piece of string. You tie it together with the head of the live bird, and you dip it into the blood that's in the kli cheres with water in it. and then you sprinkle it onto the mitzvah. But let's say you didn't, but the Chumash seems to imply that when you're slaughtering the bird, the Azov, the Eitz Erez, the Shlish Teilas, this has to be in front of you, the things that you're going to use. And if you slaughtered it and it wasn't in front of you, Rabbi Yaakov says, Asura. Since you already slaughtered it, the bird becomes Asur Bahanoah, even though you didn't do a proper shchita, because it's not, you're going to probably have to redo the shchita with another bird. Rab Shimon says, since you shlechted it not the way God commanded you to shecht it, God commanded you to shecht it with the Ezev and the Eitz Erev and Shtit Telas in front of you, and you didn't do so, Muteres, that bird is permitted bahana. So we can say like this: Ad kan loy pligi. There's no argument between Rabbi Yaakov and Shimon. Elamar Savar, Rabbi Yaakov holds shchita sheina ruya shmat shchita. If you do the shchita improperly, it's still considered a good shchita, and therefore it remains aser bahana. Umar Savar shchita sheina ruya loy shmat shchita. But the other one holds that since it's improper, it's not a good shchita, and therefore this bird never became aser bahana. But the Kuli Alma, everybody, both Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Shimon, both agree, Miyah Mechayim Lamitasra. While the bird is still alive, it doesn't become aser. And so how could you, Rash Lakish, argue against these two Tanoim who seem to say that the only time that the bird of the Betzorah becomes aser bahana is only after you do the slaughtering? And says the Gemara, and this is how it ends the sugya. Tanoihi. It's actually a machlokes Tanoim. And Rav Shlokish will go like the following Tana. The Tana Bei Rabbi Shmuel. Nema machshem mechaba mifnim. The nema machshem mechaba mechutz. And here the Torah compares ma machshem mechaba homa mifnim also by machshem kemechapa. Af machshem mechaba homa mechutz also by machshem mechapa. Basically, Rabbi Shmuel said that you compare the tzipore mitzoira to the egla arufa exactly. And just like egla arufa is mechayim, this Tanakh says it clearly. Just like Egla Rufa, when does it become Asa Bahana? While it's still alive, and that we learned before. So also Tzipar Mitzora, which is the Machshir, it's similar to the Egla Rufa, and therefore when it's still alive, it becomes Asa Bahana. And so therefore, Rav Shlokish designated it as at the time of purchase, it remains Asa Bahana, because Rav Shlokish is going according to Rabbi Yishmael's opinion. So basically, we end this sugya, and of when does a bird of a Metzorah become Asr Bahanoah? When does this? Rabbi Yochanan said, when you slaughter one bird, that bird becomes Asr Bahanoah. The other bird was never Asr Bahanoah. But Rabbi Shlokish holds, no, when you purchase these two birds to do the procedure on the behalf of the Mitzvah, they're both Asr Bahanoah. Both of them are Asr Bahanoah. When you slaughter one, that remains Asr Bahanoah, and the other ones, the Isser goes away. Gufa we learned in a Gufa we learned before, Kol Tzipa Tahara Techelu, L'Rabes Es Hamushalachas. The bird that remains alive is permitted to be eaten. The bird that's slaughtered, that remains aser. So the Gemara asks the question, why is it so? You have two birds, right? One the Torah says should be aser bahana, one the Torah implies it should be mutter bahana. The epachana, let's turn it around. The one that you slaughtered should be mutter bahana, and the bird that you're sending out and the sending away, that should become aser bahana. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Yochai, we never find something that's still alive that should have an isser on them. Any live animal doesn't have an isser on them. No prohibition on it. So you're going to try to tell me that this is prohibited? There's no such a thing. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yitzchak said, we never find live animals with issers on them. Hare, we go to Amud Beis. Muktzah, an animal that was designated for Avodah Zarah, of a nevad, or an animal that was worshipped as an Avodah Zarah, the Balechayim Ninu, they're live animals, va'asiri, and they have a prohibition on them. What's the prohibition? You can't bring them as a carbon. So but you're permitted to eat it, but you're not allowed to bring it as a carbon. So we see that a balchai, a live animal, could have an isser on it. And says the Gemara, ki asiri, they're asr legavoya to the ebishta, the hedyet mishishari. But for a plain person, a private, you want to eat the animal that's worshipped as an avodah zarah, it's permitted. But we never find an animal that you can tell me it's a kosher animal, I'm not allowed to eat it. So wait a second, Maskal Rabbi Yirmiyah, I'll find you a kosher animal that's a kosher animal. You look at it, it's a kosher a cow, and I'm not allowed to eat this cow. Why? Where do you find that? Hare noiva v'nirba be'edim. Let's say an animal copulated with a man or a woman, right? And so therefore you have to stone this animal. And you can't just say, oh, it had intercourse with a human being, I can eat it. The Balachayim Ninu, these are live animals, Vasiri, they remain asr. So let us say that the live bird remains asr. So why do we say the live bird over here remains mutter by the Metzora? Most balachayis, most live animals are not asr. Most live birds are not asr. So therefore, if I have a choice to say that the slaughtered bird is asr or the live bird is asr, I'd rather say the slaughtered bird is asr and the live bird remains permitted. The Beit Reb Shmuel, Tana Reb Shmuel, has another reason why the live bird is permitted. The Amakra, because the pasuk says, remember, what do you do with the live bird? V'shilach al pnei hasadeh. The Torah says, send it away to the field. The Torah doesn't say v'shilach l'sadeh, send this to the field. It says the Torah seems to imply that the chayas, that the bird is like the field. Kisada, masada mutaris, just like the sada, a field is permitted. Av hainame, so this live bird also mutaris will remain permitted. Frag the Gemara, right? So that was what you learned from this pasuk. We're comparing the sada to the bird, just like a field is permitted. No, a field is a piece of land that doesn't become asr. So also the bird, the live bird, remains permitted. So the Gemara asked, is it coming to teach you this? We learned it for another teaching. Because sada, what does sada teach you? The Torah is teaching you that when you send away the bird, let's say the Mitzorah is in Jaffa, right? You can't send it towards the ocean, right? It's by the Mediterranean. You have to send it towards a field. Bigvas, if you're in the place called Gvas bordered a desert, you can't send the bird to fly towards the desert. If a kennel midbar, you can't send it to fly towards the midbar, the desert. You can't be outside the city and send it to the city. Ella, what do you do with the Mitzorah? You stand in the city, and you throw the bird to fly over the wall towards the field. So we see Sada teaches you a lot of halachas. So how could it teach you that the bird remains mutter? So v'idach in kain nikter sadeh. That if the Torah is just teaching those teaching, the Torah could have wrote sadeh. My ha sadeh. Why does it write ha sadeh? Shmami notarti. You see two teachings from this. One teaching is that you have to throw the bird towards a field, and another teaching is once you throw that bird away, there's no isser on that bird. That bird is mutter to anybody who catches that bird can eat it. Rava says, I don't even need the Torah to tell me that. The Torah will never tell me, send away this bird. And what happens if if it remained asa, let's say someplace else, somewhere who doesn't know that this is a Metzorah bird, will find it, and then he'll eat it. And this brings to a disaster. So the Torah doesn't give stumbling blocks to the people. So it's most likely when the Torah said one of these birds is asa, it's the slaughtered bird that remains asa, but the non-slaughtered bird remains permitted. B'seir nazir, the Torah. One of the things that if let's say a nazir cut his hair, and now he gives his hair to a woman to be mekadesh to isha, right? He mekadesh to isha with his hair that he just cut. So we say the hair of a nazir is asabana minalan. How do you know that? Damakra kadosh gadol peras arayshay. So the Torah says kadosh. So we kadosh, and we can read it as kodesh. Yidula yehi kadosh. His hair has a din of holiness on it, and just like holy things are asabana, the hair of a nazir remains asabana. Just like I would say that kodesh, you could transfer the kedusha onto money. So I would think maybe the hair of a nazir, you could also transfer that kedusha onto money, and if you mekadesh an isha with that money, she would not be mekudeshes. Maybe that's true. So the Gemara says mikarin and kodesh. At the end of the day, it says kadosh without a vav. So we read it as kadosh karinin. It is holy. It's a holy thing that you're not allowed to benefit from, but it's not like kodesh, like regular things in the base of Mikdash, which you can transfer the kedusha onto money. So therefore, only the hair of the nazir is asa b'hana, and if the nazir would pretend to transfer the holiness onto money, the holiness will not transfer to that money, and therefore that money remains non-holy. Bepetach hamar, the firstborn of a donkey, the Torah says, if you don't want to redeem it with and give the sheep to a kohen, then you have to knock its head off. You have to chop its head off, and therefore that becomes asur b'hana. If you give that donkey to a woman to mimikadasher, that remains asur b'hana. Maybe I'm sneezing like Rab Shimon. Maybe our Mishnah doesn't go like Rab Shimon. The time we learned in the Ma'aseh, petach hamar asur b'hana. The Rabbi Yehuda, Rab Shimon says it's mutar b'hana. The petach hamar is mutar b'hana. Amar Rab Nachman, Amar Rab Abu la'ach arif of divrei hakol. Rab Shimon said that donkey, the firstborn donkey, is only mutar b'hana as long as you didn't chop its head off. But once after you chop its head off, then it becomes asur b'hana. And even Rab Shimon would agree that it's asur b'hana. That's what our Mishnah is talking about. One more piece of Gemara. Basa b'chalav. Basa b'chalav min olam. How do we know basa b'chalav is asur b'hana? Milk and meat, cheeseburger. How do you know if you mekadosh an isha with a cheeseburger, it's not, you didn't give her anything, and she's not mukudeshes. And says the Gemara, the Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, we learned in Rabbi Shmuel. It says, don't cook the goat in the milk of its mother. 3 times, Gimel Palman, it says in the Torah. 3 times this Isser says milk and meat. Echad is achila. The one teaches you're not allowed to eat it. The echad isser hanoah, and one says you're not allowed to benefit from it. The echad isser bishol, and one says you're not allowed to even cook it. Even the isser to cook it up, even if you're not going to benefit or eat it, there's an isser. So we see that milk and meat cooked together, the meat becomes asur b'hana. You're not allowed to benefit from it. So therefore, you cannot be mekadosh nisha. Concludes the Gemara. Masnisad like Tana. Our Mishnah does not go like the following. Tana we learned to the Brayso. Shimon ben Yehuda omer basa b'chalav asur b'achila umuter b'hana. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda holds basa b'chalav, a cheeseburger, you're allowed to benefit from it. Shenema. The Torah tells you you're a holy nation. Don't cook milk and meat. And when it comes to treifa food, right, something that an animal has a treifa in its lung, and you're not allowed to eat that animal, you should be holy people. So malahalan, just by treifa animals, also bachila, you're not allowed to eat it. No, you're allowed to benefit from it. You're allowed to give it as a gift to a guy. Afkan, so also by basa b'chalav, also b'achila, you're not allowed to eat it. But you're permitted to benefit from it. So according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, if a person would be mekadosh an isha with basa b'chalav, she would be mukudeshes, because he says basa b'chalav it's mutar b'hana. But the chachamim hold no, you're not allowed to be mekadosh because it's asur b'hana. It wouldn't work. Okay, we'll continue with more sugyas tomorrow regarding chulin shnishchata b'azara.